Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the Pennsylvania Department of State announces social media initiative to celebrate women in government during National Women's History Month. But first, John Micek from PennLive and Harrisburg Patriot News joins me. We got a lot on the table, and we'll do that after this break.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, there's a lot going on in the state of Pennsylvania. On April 26th, we have a primary. We've got the presidential nomination contest going on here, both on the Republican and Democratic side. Now, I know you already know that. We have a big U.S. Senate race, a nomination. The Democrats are trying to pick a candidate to run against incumbent Senator Toomey. Joining me, as often is the case, is John Micek. He's the editorial page editor for the. We have Patriot News PennLive. It's PennLive. Who cares? We know you got a great paper and a great website.
Indeed.
And first of all, they can follow you. I keep promoting you shamelessly.
Well, thank you.
Morning Coffee, is that right?
That's the Morning Coffee. It's a daily playbook of headlines and everything that's going on under the Capitol Dome. Posted to PennLive by 8:30 every morning. You can find me on Twitter @byJohnL.
There you go. There you go. Wonderful. All right. The latest poll conducted, shamelessly, I'll say this, at F&M, Franklin and Marshall College, shows a real tight race between John Kasich, who's come up in the polls in the northeastern states, particularly like Pennsylvania, and Donald Trump. 3 points separate Donald Trump, who has a 3 percentage point lead. Is it a free-for-all now?
It's appropriate we're having this conversation on Easter Sunday, aren't we? Alleluia, alleluia.
True,
Pennsylvania has risen indeed. Instead of being flyover country like we were in 2012, the state is right in the thick of it right now. You can look at Governor Kasich. I mean, he's got those ties to western Pennsylvania. Terry, he's a native McKees Rocks. You've got the Ohio state line a stone's throw away, which could account for some of that bump out in the west. But yeah, I mean, even as we come into the April 26th primary, the Republican nomination, as we've seen, is far from settled. I was surprised to see Governor Kasich leapfrog Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, but again, given the regional ties in the West, that could account for some of the sentiment there.
And you also have a large contingent of sort of moderate to conservative in the southeastern part of the state, in the Philly burbs, and up in the Lehigh Valley. You used to write for the Allentown Morning Call. You know that area quite well.
Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, who's the front runner, at 33%, narrowly within your margin, still, has problems among a lot of Pennsylvania Republican voters. We see that in his unfavorables, which are pretty high in the new poll as well. It's funny that almost as many Pennsylvania Republicans view him unfavorably as they do favorably in the poll.
Well, it's been a pretty bitter. I mean, let's be candid. You've covered politics for a long time, as I have. I don't remember a time when the language that these candidates used against each other were as bitter, vituperative, mean, nasty. I don't know if I have any other descriptions on the top of my head. Have you ever seen anything quite like this? The name calling, bringing the wives into this.
You've pretty much emptied the thesaurus there to talk about this this race. And in almost 25 years of covering politics, I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, within the last week, we've had repeated violent incidents erupt at Trump rallies. NPR reporters, in fact, were sent last week for combat training, so they can conduct themselves and keep themselves safe at Trump rallies. You also saw the two candidates square off sort of a proxy battle over their wives going into the Utah primary last week. A pro-Ted Cruz super PAC aired a commercial that tried to shame Melania Trump for her past history as a high fashion model. Ted Cruz hit back. Trump hit back, said, if you come after my wife, I'll spill the beans on your wife. And we were talking about this before we went on air, Terry. I mean, it's one thing if the wives come out and start smacking the competitors, but if the wives are coming out and saying, "Vote for my husband, he's a decent guy," it should be. Traditionally, it's been hands off the wives, hands off the kids, and this year it's
anything goes, right?
It's a food fight. It really is.
Yeah. All right. Before we go on to another subject, I have to get into this delegate selection. I know we're into the weeds.
I hope you can explain it.
71 delegates go to the Republican convention.
Correct.
But 54 of them are selected out of congressional districts.
That's right.
We have 18 of them. 3 delegates will go from each of the 18 congressional districts to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. But they go unbound or uncommitted and explain now. Their names are on the ballot, but no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll
see voters in each of the state's 18 congressional districts, as you say, will be seeing a bunch of names on their ballots running for Republican delegates. Some of those names be familiar. Congressman Marian K, for instance, in the 6th congressional district is one of them. And yeah, they do run unpledged compared to the pledged kind of Republican equivalent of superdelegates. And, you know, who knows how that's going to shake out during the RNC in Cleveland. If Trump doesn't get to 1237, which is the 60% needed to claim the nomination, you know, there could be a floor fight.
What happened? I mean, here's another scenario. Trump's 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and that's conceivable. The mathematics of it. So all of a sudden, the 54 Pennsylvania delegates, even if they support a candidate, imagine the pressure on them to flip to Trump or to oppose him. Imagine what the
you will see. I'm going to Cleveland, and I'll be looking for that to see the crews of the Trump people bending elbows.
You and I will be in Cleveland together.
Indeed. I mean, depending on the way these things shake out, depending on the way the Pennsylvania race shakes out, you know, it'll be fascinating to watch.
All right, let's run to a quick break, and we come back. I want to talk about the Pennsylvania Senate election and what Governor Wolf used a rarely used method of dealing with a state law. He's letting it become law without what?
Without his signature.
Without his signature. John Micek is on the program at the moment. We're going to do some more with John after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
I'm chatting with John Micek from the PennLive Patriot News. We're talking about all things politics for the moment. All right, the U.S. Senate race is pretty important. Pat Toomey is in the crosshairs. This is one of the seats that's likely to make a difference as to whether the Democrats win the 5 seats they need to regain control of the Senate.
Exactly.
The eyes of the country will be on this, and the Democratic primary. Joe Sestak in the Franklin and Marshall poll has now expanded his lead over Katie McGinty with John Fetterman in single digits. Give us a sense about that race. What are the factors? What's going on in it that our viewers should understand?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I mean, we saw early on in this contest the Democrats had this sort of anybody but Sestak movement, and that's what Katie McGinty responded to. We had Allentown Mayor Ed Pawlowski very sort of briefly in the mix until he ran into his troubles up there in Allentown and had to withdraw. So to see Congressman Sestak sort of emerge now as the consensus frontrunner, given the initial skepticism and his loss in 2010 to Pat Toomey, is a little interesting. And you're right, Terry. I mean, in every major political publication, from the Washington Post to Politica, Senator Toomey's seat is one of the 5, is one of those key 5, one of the most vulnerable U.S. Senate seats in the country. They need 5. They need to take 5 seats for the outright majority, or 4 with a Democratic veep to flip, depending on the presidential math. All 3 candidates are now on the air. They've launched intro ads to build name recognition. Senator Toomey hit the airwaves with 2 spots last week, both of them punching up his record on terrorism and public safety.
And of course, guns.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right, his support for gun control.
Right.
He's trying to come to the middle, maybe a little bit, to attract some of those conservative Western Dems.
Here's what's pretty fascinating that I observed in the race. Joe Sestak, the admiral, has been running for 5 years.
He has.
He has walked and traversed this state like no other candidate has done, not even Arlen Specter. We used to talk about He's an indefatigable campaigner, and he's built a base among grassroots Democrats. Am I right about that?
No, absolutely. I mean, the guy is tireless. He walked to see us at PennLive last summer, for goodness sake, when he was on his statewide walking.
In the summer when it's 90 degrees?
He's all sweaty.
You would do that. Now you're the runner. You run.
I don't know that I would do something like that. But, I mean, his shirt collar open and the hike and the trail boots on and everything. But I mean, the guy is tireless, and I've seen him exhaust aides half his age. And there is something there in Sustag who appeals to sort of the same sort of Bernie Sanders contingent within the party.
Yeah.
And
he also has a niche: defense, foreign policy,
vice admiral,
military.
He's good on that stuff.
And he's got that niche down,
yes,
right?
Yes, he does. You'll see him on CNN. You'll see him on MSNBC, pontificating about it.
All right, let's talk about Katie McGinty. She is clearly the favorite of the Democratic establishment. Governor Wolf has endorsed her. Senator Casey has endorsed her, and Ed Rendell's her campaign manager. She now looks like in these commercials, she's running a campaign very much like Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
Women, go ahead, finish.
No, I mean, there's this ad, the 21%, emphasizing the pay gap between female and male workers. That was her opening gambit with that. And she is sort of running in that Hillary Clinton lane. What's kind of funny, though, is you have the backing of the Democratic establishment, but just this past week, Jim Byrne, the former Democratic state chairman from Allegheny County, came out for Sestak.
Surprise.
Kind of a surprise thing, and not for nothing. That's kind of there's some bad blood between he and Governor Wolf. Governor Wolf got him bounced as head of the state party. Governor Wolf was backing McGinty.
Yeah.
Jim Byrne goes to Sestak.
Yeah. And then John Fetterman, the mayor of Braddock, one of those old steel towns that's sort of gone through a big transition, or trying to transition from the old steel mills to a more modern life and conveyances and other aspects of it. He's a different kind of candidate. He doesn't own a suit. He has more tattoos than I could probably find in any three people, right? And he's a fascinating guy, completely unconventional in every way. But before you're tempted to dismiss him as kind of a political novelty, it's really important to stress that he did do a lot of great work in Braddock, which was one of those diseased Western Pennsylvania steel towns, and he did help see it through to something of a renaissance. Right.
And because he's running in a perfect year, because this year, if it's nothing else, is the year of the outsider.
Bernie Sanders,
and he's endorsed Bernie Sanders, so he has that sort of grassroots lane.
All right, before I let you go, Governor Wolf let about $7 billion in state funding that the Republican basically legislature had sent to him. The money he vetoed earlier, or late last year, I guess, and he let it become law without his signature. What does that all mean?
It's a so-called pocket veto. We haven't seen that, I think, since the Shap years, when you and I were talking just before the show went on the air. Governor Wolf was under tremendous pressure from legislative Democrats, particularly in the Senate, not to veto the 3 months of spending that the Senate Republicans and House Republicans had sent to him a couple of weeks ago. We're getting to a point now where Penn State's Agricultural Extension Center is saying it would have to lay off 1,100 employees from May 1st if there wasn't an infusion of state money.
A lot of pressure.
Some school districts, I heard of two in Western Pennsylvania, Charleroi and Aliquippa, said they would have to literally close their doors on May 1 because they could no longer borrow. So, there was tremendous pressure. These Democrats are going back to the districts and getting hammered.
So the Democrats, he met with the Democrats, I think it was last week in caucus, and they were chatting about it. And then very quickly, the Democratic leader in the House puts out a statement in support of what Governor Wolf did. So it's not just pressure from the schools and pressure from counties on human services and nonprofits, but it looked like the Democrats were saying, let's live to fight this battle in the new budget,
what
right?
They can do now, we're basically 2 weeks out from the fight over the 16-17 budget. They can fight all those fights. In there, we should add that Governor Wolf vetoed what's known as the fiscal code. There was some language in there that environmentalists didn't like, so that falls. Republicans are angry about that, though, because they say it also X's out some money for public schools, so expect that to be litigated, too.
John, thanks as always for coming in. Great update. Anytime. All right, let's talk about National Women's History Month. We'll do that after we pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit betterwithcoal.com.
Well, welcome back to the program. Joining me is Miriam Schneider. She's the Deputy Secretary in the Department of State and Administration. I think they got that right. Did I get that right?
Deputy Secretary for Elections and Administration.
For elections, I'll get that. But you're in the Department of State,
yes,
right?
Yes,
so I got part of that right. At any rate, the Secretary is with us, and we're glad to have her. All right, we're going to talk about two things. Let's first of all talk about the social media initiative. It's National Women's History Month coming up. Here we go. And then we got to talk about the voter registration change. You know I'm not letting you get off the program without talking about that. All right, what's going on with this social media initiative?
Well, as you said, March is National Women's History Month, and the theme this year is women. The national theme is women in government, and so the Department of State has been running a social media campaign all month, and it's hashtag #GovLikeAWoman, and it's highlighting women in leadership positions at the Department of State, and so every couple of days, we've had a different profile of women who work in our department and why they work in state government. And we've gotten great feedback, a lot of positive feedback. Yeah, we're really pleased with it. And sometimes young people don't think about working in state government. And you
would think the millennials would take, given the job market, but go ahead, would welcome that.
When you work in state government, you're working on cutting edge issues. These are the issues that are in the headlines.
Oh, sure.
And
the
mission, that's why, the mission of government is very important. And that's why I work in state government.
You're going to get a flood of applicants now. You do realize that, Secretary, right?
Bring them on, especially IT.
Yeah. I mean, when you're doing this social media campaign, are you emphasizing some aspect of the women's role? What is that about?
Right. So we kicked it off with my I guess a graphic on our Facebook page, which is that's our Twitter handle is @PA State DEPT, but the Pennsylvania Department of State. And so we all wrote a statement of why I work in state government. So I work in state government because I have the ability to positively impact the voting experience of all Pennsylvania voters, and I'm deeply committed to that mission. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And so every one of us did a little statement of why we're here, and I think people don't think about that. And
you personalize it.
Yes, exactly. And people have shared it. We've got lots of shares, and it just highlights that women are making a contribution. Yeah. Sometimes you don't see that. They're in the background.
Now, it'd be interesting if other departments in state government, and let's even expand it, if cities and counties and townships and boroughs, would do the same thing, highlighting what women do and what role they play. I mean, it would be neat if that would be expanded. I mean, how can you be against talking about what women do? It's valuable in the way of recruiting women into public service, right?
Right. Well, actually, we've gotten that feedback. Well, the other agencies, I think DCED is going to do a similar initiative, and we're going to have a Twitter town hall. We're actually going to have two: one bilingual, one with Aldea on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the department is hosting a Twitter town hall. It's our hashtag. Okay. So you're welcome to join us on Twitter on Tuesday at 12.
All right, I'm chatting with Marian Schneider. She's the Deputy Secretary for Elections and Administrations. I got that right. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine, and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back. Joining me is Miriam Schneider. She's the Deputy Secretary for Elections and Administration. I got that right. All right, let's talk about online registration. It's been a huge success, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. Earlier this week, we had 250,000, 250,000 users. Today, it's up to 261,000. Almost 262,000 people have used since launch. But just in 2016 alone, we've had over 200,000 users. And out of those, about 115,000 are new registrants.
Wow.
And yeah, and it's
of course, the presidential election, you would probably see that, right?
Well, we always do see a spike, especially around the primary and a presidential election year. We see a spike right around the registration deadline.
Yeah.
And by the way,
registration deadline is, get that out.
March 28th.
Monday.
Monday. So you can do up until 11:59 on Monday on our online voter registration, which is register.votespa.com. And we have a new feature. Even if you have a record at PennDOT, we retrieve your signature from your PennDOT record. But if you don't have a PennDOT record, like you don't drive, you can take a photo of your signature and upload it, and it's all electronic.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yes, it's very cool, and it means that it'll go in and it'll be complete. Otherwise, you have to mail in your signature. So I want to emphasize that if your signature wasn't attached or you said you were going to mail it in, it must be postmarked by Monday.
Yeah.
Very important.
All right. About 94,000 people have changed from different parties or independent to Republican switchers, and 69,000 people have gone to the Democrats. Is that about right?
Yes, those are the most recent numbers we have.
I'm going to tweet those out. I just want to tell you that right now. I mean, that's huge. So, and we know that's driven by the presidential campaign and all of that. Now, you don't track the reasons why. That's not your job anyway, right?
No. You don't ask for that when you change your party affiliation. We don't track that.
The reasons don't. Yeah.
But we have
guys like me we get into the reasons, right? We're allowed to do that.
You can poll on that.
Yeah, we can poll on that.
But we have a closed primary in Pennsylvania. If people want to vote in the party nominating primary, they have to be registered in one of those parties. So you can't show up on the primary election day if you're not registered in that party.
All right, thanks for coming in. This is a wonderful update. We'll see what happens with National Women's History Month. I think I said it's April, it's March. You know, did I say that? All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.